I thought will readings were supposed to be predictable quiet rooms, polite nods, nothing to do with people like me. But the moment the lawyer opened the final envelope, something in his expression shifted. The air tightened. A dozen decorated officers and a row of restless relatives turned their heads at the same time, like they'd all been waiting for a signal I didn't understand. I sat in the back, still in my Navy nursing uniform, trying not to take up space. I wasn't family. I wasn't even meant to be noticed. Then the lawyer lifted his gaze slow, deliberate, and looked straight at me. "Miss Harper," he said, his voice catching. "Do you know who your biological parents are?" My heart slammed against my ribs. For a second, I honestly thought he was speaking to someone behind me. He wasn't. The entire room was staring at me, and in that moment I knew my life was no longer my own. My name is Emily Harper, and until that moment, I had never felt smaller in my life. The room didn't just go quiet, it tightened around me. Like every breath belonged to someone else. The general's relatives sat in polished rows, diamonds glinting, suit jackets stiff, all of them staring at me with the same expression. "Why her?" I swallowed hard. I don't understand," I said to Mr. Caldwell, the lawyer. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he glanced at the will in his hands as though the ink itself might rearrange and explain everything for him. Behind me, someone scoffed. "She doesn't know her parents? How is that our problem?" Another voice chimed in. "This is ridiculous. She's not even family." Entering the stade and tin the messavisions. They robbling that it tinstirred in two intentions present happage. Their words stung, but I had heard worse. Just a nurse. Just the help. Just the girl without a real family. It shouldn't have hurt anymore. But it did. Mr. Caldwell cleared his throat. "Miss Harper, the general included language in his will that strongly suggests you might have a personal connection to him." My pulse thudded in my ears. "What kind of connection?" I whispered. He met my eyes, and for a moment, I thought he looked almost sorry. Before he could answer, Derek Lawson, the general's most vocal nephew, slammed a hand on the table. "This is insane," he barked. She bandaged the man's wounds, brought him pills, mopped sweat off his forehead. "That doesn't make her part of this family." "I never said it did," I said softly. He sneered. "Then why are you even here?" Good question. One I'd been asking myself from the second I walked into this room. The general's attorney had insisted on my presence. "By the general's request," he'd said. Personal request. At the time, I assumed it was a formality, maybe a thank you note, or a token gift to acknowledge caregiving. Nothing extraordinary, nothing life-changing. But the way everyone was looking at me now made me feel like I had wandered into the wrong story, someone else's story. Captain Avery, one of the few kind faces in the room, leaned toward me. "Emily," he murmured, "did General Lawson ever say anything unusual to you? Anything about family?" I shook my head slowly. "No, he never talked about his family. Ever." Which was true. During lonely nights on the medical floor, the general spoke of wars, regrets, and the soldiers he'd lost, but never once mentioned a wife, a sibling, a child. He was a locked door of a man, and somehow, he'd dragged me into the house behind it. Mr. Caldwell finally exhaled, as though accepting there was no soft way to say what he needed to say. "There is a section in the will," he began, referring to a woman the general believed he had lost decades ago. His words were, "my sister's daughter." The room froze, my stomach twisted. Mr. Caldwell continued. He wrote that he suspected her child might still be alive." A gasp rose from someone in the front row. Another whisper. "No, that's not possible. She disappeared. Don't bring her back into this." "Who is he talking about?" I managed. Mr. Caldwell looked straight into my eyes. "Emily. He believed that child might be you." I felt the floor shift under me. Someone laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. Derek again. "Her? His niece's kid? She has no father, no history, no—" My chair scraped as I stood. "I have a history," I said, louder than I meant to. Just not one anyone ever bothered to help me understand. And for the first time in that suffocating room, not one person spoke. Because the truth was no longer a whisper. It had become a fault line, and something inside me knew. The ground was about to break open. I didn't answer Mr. Caldwell. I couldn't. His words had struck something, buried something I'd spent years pretending wasn't there. It rose so fast, so violently. It felt like drowning. Captain Avery touched my elbow gently. "Emily, breathe," I tried. But instead of breath, memories came. Not soft ones. Not warm ones. The kind that scrape on their way up. I was 8 the first time. I realized other kids had things I didn't like. Fathers who came to school recitals, grandparents who visited for Christmas, and photo albums filled with people who shared their eyes. One day, I asked my mother, "Mom, do I have a dad?" She froze right in the middle of folding laundry. A sock slipped from her hand. "Of course you do," she whispered. "Everyone does." "Then where is he?" She stared at the wall behind me, as if the answer were written there. "He's not part of our life, Emily." "Why not?" She swallowed hard. "Because some people don't know how to love without hurting." I didn't understand what that meant. I still don't, but I never forgot the fear in her voice. When I was 11, it happened. The moment that carved a hole in me. It was late afternoon, sunlight slanting through the blinds in long strips of gold. I was digging through Mom's closet looking for the box of old holiday lights when I stumbled on a shoebox I'd never seen before. Inside, a yellowed hospital bracelet, a birth certificate with half the fields blank. A photograph of a woman who looked hauntingly like me but no one I recognized. And a ripped envelope with no stamp, no name. Just 3 shaky words, "Don't tell her." I remember whispering, "Mom? Who is this?" The moment she saw what I was holding, something inside her shattered. She rushed across the room, snatched the shoebox from my hands, slammed the lid shut, and hugged it to her chest like it was dangerous. "Where did you get that?" she breathed. "In your closet," I said, terrified. "Mom, why?" "Emily." Her voice cracked. "This isn't for you. But it's about me, isn't it?" She closed her eyes. "Some things," she whispered, "hurt too much to pass on." Then she did something she had never done before. She cried, quiet, shaking sobs that ripped through her. I reached for her hand. "Tell me," I begged. "Please." But she shook her head. "I am your family," she whispered fiercely. "That's enough." And that was the end of it. She hid the box somewhere else. I never found it again. Not after she died. Not after I searched every corner of our apartment until my fingers bled from digging through old cardboard. The conference room came back into focus. Derek's voice sliced through the haze. "She looks like she's about to faint. Maybe she knows she doesn't belong here." I blinked, grounding myself. I wasn't that scared 11-year-old anymore. Mr. Caldwell placed a stack of documents on the table. "The general didn't believe your mother left because she didn't care," he said quietly. "He believed she left because she was running from something." "From what?" I whispered. He hesitated. "From this family." My breath caught. From this family. From these people. Questions I had buried for decades clawed their way up. Who was my father? Who was the woman in the photo? Why did my mother hide? Why did she lie? And, God help me, what did General Lawson know that I didn't? Something inside me shifted. Not fear. Not confusion. Something sharper. A need. A need for the truth. No matter what it cost. Mr. Caldwell didn't speak at first. He simply rested his hand on the stack of documents in front of him, pressing them flat, as if steadying something heavy inside. "Miss Harper," he said quietly. "Before the general passed, he asked me to look into a matter, privately." My stomach tightened. "A matter concerning you." Behind us, Derek let out a laugh, short, sharp, ugly. Of course he did. Old men get confused at the end. He probably thought she looked like someone he used to know. Captain Avery shot him a cold look. "Show some respect." "Oh please," Derek barked. "He barely spoke to us, but suddenly he thinks the nurse's family? Give me a break." I wished desperately that I could walk out of that room. My legs felt like wet sand, but Mr. Caldwell ignored Derek completely. "Emily," he said, sliding the manila folder toward me. "The general believed your mother might have been connected to his own sister, Margaret." I blinked. My mother? Connected to Margaret Lawson Wells? The name felt foreign on my tongue, like a stranger's name. "Not my family's. Not mine." Mr. Caldwell nodded. He remembered a young woman who worked at Fort Waverly nearly 3 decades ago. A civilian nurse. Quiet, soft-spoken, but unforgettable. I stared at him. "My mother was a nurse, but she never told me she worked on a base. She left suddenly, he said. Without warning. Without forwarding information. That sounds like her, I whispered. Mr. Caldwell opened the folder. My breath stopped. Inside were a faded personnel photo of a woman who looked like my mother, only younger, brighter. A copy of a military base ID with the name Rachel Wells. A handwritten note in neat cursive. Find her. Confirm. And a second image, a photograph of her standing with another woman who shared her features. Who is that? I whispered, pointing at the second woman. That, he said softly, is Margaret, the general's sister. For a moment, the room felt like a sinking ship. Everything tilted. Everything drowned. My mother's last name wasn't Wells, I said quietly. It was Harper. Perhaps, Mr. Caldwell said gently, because she changed it. I shook my head. No, she would have told me. But even as I said it, I saw her face again. The way she snatched the shoebox from my hands. The way she trembled. The way she whispered. Some things hurt too much to pass on. Derek snatched the photo from the table. This proves nothing, he shouted. Women look alike. And even if her mother was some girl who worked with Aunt Margaret, that doesn't make her. Derek. Mr. Caldwell's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down. The room froze. He turned back to me. The general didn't jump to conclusions, he said. He needed confirmation. That's why he made this request. What request? I whispered. He hesitated only a heartbeat, but enough for me to feel the weight of whatever came next. He asked me to obtain records, he said slowly. Birth records, adoption documents, hospital transfers, anything connected to your mother's disappearance. My heart thrashed in my chest. And what did you find? I asked. He closed the file softly, as though sealing something delicate. Enough, he said, to believe your mother fled this family out of fear, and enough to believe the child she carried. I felt Captain Avery tense beside me. It was Margaret Lawson Wells's grandchild. Mr. Caldwell finished quietly. My voice barely broke the air. And that child was me? Silence swallowed the room. No one laughed, not even Derek, because deep down, even through their denial, their anger, their greed, they recognized something. The general didn't make mistakes. He didn't guess. He didn't hope. He knew. Mr. Caldwell stood. There's more, he said. But it's not kept in this office. He handed me a small brass key. The metal was warm in my palm, as if it had waited years to find me. This, he said, opens a trunk in the general's home. He instructed me to give it to you personally. My hands trembled. What's inside it? I whispered. His expression softened the way people look at someone about to learn something that will change them forever. Answers, he said. And the rest of your story? I stared at the brass key in my hand long after the room emptied. It felt heavier than it should. Like metal wasn't the only thing it carried. Emily, Captain Avery said quietly, you don't have to do this alone. But I did, because whatever truth waited behind that lock belonged to me. The general's estate sat on a hill outside of town, half hidden behind towering oaks that swayed like old soldiers standing guard. The driveway was long, paved with stones that clicked under my boots as I walked toward the door. I raised my hand to knock, but the door opened before my knuckles touched it. A woman in her late 60s, hair pinned neatly, eyes sharp but warm, stood there. You must be Emily, she said softly. I'm Helen Brooks. I kept house for the general for nearly 30 years. She studied my face as if memorizing it. You look like her, she whispered. My heart skipped. Like who? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she stepped aside. Come in. He wanted you to see something. The house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Hallways lined with photographs stretched out like corridors of a museum. Images of the general shaking hands with presidents, saluting troops, standing stiffly beside foreign dignitaries. But a different set of photos caught my eye. Children, a woman laughing beside a Christmas tree, a young girl riding a bicycle, dark hair, green eyes. This hallway belonged to Margaret, Mrs. Brooks said quietly. I stopped breathing. Margaret, my grandmother. Mrs. Brooks placed a hand on my shoulder. He left the room at the end for you. The hallway narrowed until it ended at a small wooden door. I pushed it open. The room was nothing like the rest of the estate. No medals, no portraits, no rigid military order, just a single window letting in weak afternoon light, a writing desk, and the cedar trunk. The trunk looked old, older than the house itself. The brass lock was scratched, polished in places where hands had touched it again and again, as if it had been opened many times, or waited too long for the right hands. Mrs. Brooks stood at the threshold, not entering. "He came here almost every night near the end," she whispered. "Sometimes he just sat on the floor beside that trunk, holding things he never spoke about." "What things?" I asked. She shook her head. "He only ever said one sentence about you. When she's ready, she'll understand." My fingers tightened around the key. Ready. I wasn't ready, but I had to be. I knelt in front of the trunk, the wood sighing under my touch. The key slid into the lock with a soft scrape, and for a moment, I hesitated. Then I turned it. Click. The lid lifted. A breath of cedar and thyme washed over me. Inside were bundles of letters tied with worn ribbon, a thick binder labeled Lawson, Wells lineage, a velvet pouch, dozens of photographs wrapped in tissue paper, a small journal with a cracked spine. My hand shook as I lifted the top photograph. A girl, maybe 17, smiling shyly at the camera. My throat closed. I had seen that face before. In the shoebox, in my dreams, in my mirror. It was my mother. Younger, brighter, free. A second photograph slipped out from beneath it. My mother again, but this time standing beside another woman. She had the same eyes, the same shape of jaw, the same softness. "Margaret," I whispered. Mrs. Brooks nodded. "Your grandmother loved your mother more than anything in the world," she said. "But life was cruel to them." I swallowed hard. "What happened to them?" She looked at the trunk. "The answers are all there, Emily." Her voice trembled just slightly. "But some truths don't just reveal your past. They change your future." A chill ran through me, because deep down, I knew. She wasn't talking about my mother. She was talking about me. And this trunk wasn't just a box of memories. It was the doorway to a family war I'd never known I was born into. The letters looked fragile, like they'd crumble if I breathed too hard. Their ribbons were frayed, the paper thin and yellowed around the edges. The kind of old that held heartbreak the way wood held age. My hands trembled as I untied the first bundle. A letter slid free. The handwriting was elegant, precise. Not my mother's. Older, softer. Margaret. My grandmother. I swallowed and began reading. "Raymond, I don't know what else to do." He came again. He said Elizabeth belongs with our side of the family, as if she were property, as if love were inheritance. Ugh. My breath caught. Elizabeth. My mother's first name. I read on, my pulse thudding. He threatened to take the child if Rachel won't agree to be part of the family again. She cried in my arms tonight. I've never seen her so frightened. Frightened? My mother? The woman who scraped together our life with sheer will, who faced overdue bills and double shifts without blinking, had been frightened? I pressed a hand to my chest. Mrs. Brooks lowered herself into the chair by the door but said nothing. She let me read. Another letter. "We're leaving tonight. I know you'll be angry, Raymond. But staying is no longer safe. I refuse to let him lay claim to Elizabeth. Or the child she carries." My heart dropped. The child she carries. Me. My fingers shook violently. I had to force myself to keep reading. "Please don't look for us. I'm changing our names. It's the only way to keep them safe. I pray you understand someday." I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep the sob inside. So the rumors were true. My mother didn't leave because she was ashamed, or reckless, or unstable. She left because someone tried to take her baby. Someone from this family. Someone who thought a child was a trophy. A bloodline. A piece of legacy to fight over. My stomach twisted. "Mrs. Brooks? Who is she running from?" Mrs. Brooks hesitated, eyes softening. "Derek's father," she said quietly. "The general's brother. He believed lineage was destiny. That every child born into the Lawson bloodline belonged to the family, not the mother." It felt like ice dropped into my veins. "That man," I whispered, "wanted to take me." She nodded. "Your mother knew he wouldn't stop. So Margaret helped her disappear." I covered my face, crying silently into my palms. All those years I thought Mom kept me at a distance. That she didn't trust me enough. Or didn't want me to know where I came from. But it wasn't that. She wasn't hiding because she didn't love me. She was hiding because she loved me too much. My tears blurred the next envelope, smaller and sealed with a trembling script. "For Rachel, if she ever needs strength." I opened it. Inside was a single page written by Margaret. My sweet girl, if you ever feel alone, remember this. You were not abandoned. You were protected. My throat felt raw. I reached into the trunk again and found a velvet pouch. Inside was a gold necklace with a tiny pendant, a leaf. I turned it over. A single word was engraved. Harper Wells. My breath left me in a rush. Not Harper. Not Wells. Both? Both parts of me. Both sides of the women who sacrificed everything so I could live a life without chains. Mrs. Brooks's voice shook. He carried that necklace for years. He asked me once, "Do you think she'll come back for her name?" My chest caved. "He never meant to expose you," she whispered. "He only wanted to understand what happened to his sister, and to know if you were safe." I clutched the pendant to my heart, sobbing freely now, not because of pain, but because for the first time in my life, I understood the echo I'd felt my entire childhood. The hollow space inside me wasn't emptiness. It was a missing story. And now, piece by piece, I was finally holding it. But the letters weren't done. At the bottom of the trunk lay one more envelope. Sealed. Unopened. Addressed in the General's unmistakable handwriting. For Emily. When she is ready. A chill raced down my spine. "What's in that one?" I whispered. Mrs. Brooks looked at the envelope with a mixture of fear and tenderness. "That," she said, "is the part he could never say aloud." I lifted the envelope. It was heavier than the rest. Heavier, because it didn't just hold the past. It held the truth he died with. And I knew, once I opened it, nothing in my life would ever be the same. I hadn't even caught my breath from the trunk revelations when Mr. Caldwell called. "Emily," he said, voice tense, "you need to return to the office. Now." Something in his tone made my stomach twist. When I arrived, the hallway outside the conference room reverberated with shouting. Angry, vicious shouting. I stepped inside and the chaos snapped into focus. Derek stood at the far end, red-faced and spitting rage. Two of his cousins flanked him like guard dogs, pacing, snarling, feeding off each other's fury. The moment they saw me, the outburst sharpened like a blade. "There she is. The liar. She's trying to steal the estate. Dragging her sob story in here like we'll fall for it." I froze. Mr. Caldwell stepped in front of me protectively. "This behavior will stop," he said sharply. But Derek thrust a finger toward me. "You don't get to tell us to stop. She's a stranger. A nurse. She has no place in this family." "That's enough," Mr. Caldwell snapped. "No," Derek barked. "It's not. She wants money. She wants the house. She wants the Lawson name. But she's nothing. Nothing. Inimust and speeder. Inimust and stabilis." Something snapped inside me then. Not in anger, but in clarity. Because after everything I'd seen in that trunk, after every letter, every photo, every whispered truth, he wasn't yelling at a nurse. He was yelling at a ghost his family had tried and failed to erase. I stepped forward. "I'm not here for your money," I said quietly. The room stilled. My voice was softer than Derek's fury, but it cut deeper. "I'm here because your uncle asked me to be." Derek laughed loud, cruel. "You expect us to believe that? You expect us to think he cared about you? You..." His lip curled. "You're not blood. Blood." That word struck something primal in me. I reached into my bag, pulled out the binder from the trunk, and slammed it onto the table. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. "This," I said, "is what your uncle left behind. Letters, records, documents your family hid from each other for decades." Derek rolled his eyes. "So what? Anyone can scribble fake letters." I opened the first one. "The handwriting," I said coldly, "matches Margaret Lawson Wells. Verified, dated, filed." I read aloud. "He said he would take Elizabeth's child if she didn't comply. I won't allow it. We're leaving tonight." Into 8. Silence. The kind that drops like a guillotine. I met Derek's eyes. "Your father threatened my grandmother. And my mother. He tried to control them. Tried to claim me before I was even born." "That's a lie," he started. I cut him off. "Is it? Because here's another," I said, flipping to the next letter. "We are changing our names. It's the only way to protect the baby. I'm no insisted in his pel for speak." Gasps rippled through the room. "Protect the baby," I repeated. That baby was me. A woman Derek's aunt covered her mouth, tears gathering. "No," she whispered. "No, Margaret never." "She never said." "She didn't say," I shot back. Because she was running for her life. I lifted the next item from the binder. The necklace. The gold leaf pendant glowed under the fluorescence. This, I said, my voice breaking, is my mother's birthright, and mine, Harper Wells. The name she couldn't give me because your branch of the family wouldn't let her raise me in peace. Derek's face contorted. You're twisting everything. I dropped the final document on the table. The DNA test. The one with the Lawson crest printed across the top. The one with my name beside match. Mr. Caldwell spoke before Derek could. This test was ordered by General Lawson months before his death. Chain of custody verified. Medical examiner certified. It proves, without question, that Emily Harper is biologically connected to the Lawson bloodline. A collective inhale swept the room. Mr. Caldwell wasn't finished. And per the General's explicit instructions, she is to be recognized as a rightful heir. Derek staggered back like he'd been struck. No, he croaked. No, she can't. This isn't. This, I said, stepping forward, is the truth. My voice trembled, not from fear but from the raw weight of everything behind me. You call me just a nurse. But I was the one who sat with him when he was scared. I was the one who held his hand during the bad nights. I was the one who listened when he couldn't sleep, as he's has come to Nur-Apted. Tears blurred my vision. You weren't there. Not once. Someone in the back sobbed quietly. I pointed to the documents. To him, these weren't secrets. They were regrets. He wanted to make things right. He wanted to find the granddaughter he lost. And he did. I pressed a hand to my chest. He found me. Derek's voice cracked. That doesn't make you family. I looked at him, really looked at him. You think family is about last names and bloodlines? Then explain why the only person who treated your uncle like a human being at the end of his life was a woman you claim doesn't belong. The room broke. No shouting, no arguing. Just silence. Raw, heavy. Finally, Derek's aunt whispered, "He loved you, didn't he?" I nodded through tears. In the only way he knew how. Her shoulders crumpled as the truth sank in. Mr. Caldwell closed the binder gently. The estate, he announced formally, belongs to Miss Harper. Contesting it will fail. The General made sure of that. One by one, the relatives left, some stunned, some trembling, some ashamed. When the door finally clicked shut, I sank into a chair, exhausted, hollow, but free. Mr. Caldwell sat across from me, sighing deeply. You handled that with more grace, he murmured, than most people could ever manage. I don't feel graceful, I whispered. He smiled sadly. No, you feel the truth, and truth hurts before it heals. I touched the pendant around my neck. For the first time, the name on the back didn't feel like a mystery. It felt like mine. When the last relative stormed out, the office felt eerily quiet. Too quiet. After the storm of shouting that had filled it minutes earlier, I sank into the leather chair, the adrenaline draining from my body so quickly it left me trembling. My hands were still wrapped around the pendant at my neck as if it were the only thing anchoring me to the earth. Mr. Caldwell sat across from me, rubbing his temples. You know, he said softly, the General once told me he was afraid of dying with regrets. I think finding you eased some of that. I didn't answer at first. My voice felt buried under everything. Grief, relief, anger, exhaustion. Finally, I whispered, what am I supposed to do with all of this? He gestured to the stack of inheritance documents on the table. That depends, he said, on what you believe a Lawson legacy should be. I laughed under my breath. It came out shaky. A legacy, I repeated. I don't even know what that means in my life. My entire existence had been built from survival, not inheritance. I grew up counting coins on grocery store conveyor belts, not stock portfolios. My mother worked 2 jobs to keep us alive. I'd patched my life together the best I could. School loans, night shifts, secondhand clothes, cheap apartments, and now, this, a mansion, documents, money I never asked for, a family tree that looked like it belonged to someone else. I stared at my hands. What would he have wanted? I asked quietly. Mr. Caldwell gave a tired smile. He once told me he wished he'd done more with his life than build a name. He said names don't heal people. Actions do. The words hit something deep. Actions. The ones I'd watched my mother take quiet sacrifices no one ever applauded. The ones Margaret took running to keep her daughter and granddaughter safe. The ones the General took trying to find us again, even when time was running out. I stood, my mind shifting, clicking into place like a lock turning. "Can I see the house again?" I asked. "Of course," Mr. Caldwell said. The estate looked different this time. Not bigger, not grander, just full of ghosts and possibility. I walked through the foyer, the polished floors reflecting soft afternoon light, through the parlor where family portraits used to hang, through the dining room where no one seemed to eat in years. But when I reached the memory room, the one with the cedar trunk, my breath caught. I knelt beside the trunk one last time and pressed my hand against the lid. "Thank you," I whispered to the silence. Not just to him, to all of them. To the women who didn't survive long enough to see me reclaim what they lost. Standing again, I walked through every room slowly, letting instinct guide me. The parlor wasn't meant for parties. It could become a counseling room. The dining room could be a waiting area for families who couldn't afford healthcare. The ballroom, echoing, vast, could become a therapy center for injured veterans. Rooms built for prestige could be rebuilt for purpose. And for the first time since the will reading, my lungs expanded with something that felt like clarity. Maybe even hope. Behind me, Mrs. Brooks stepped quietly into the doorway. "You look like you've made a decision," she said. I nodded. "This house was never meant to be a trophy," I said softly. "It wants to be alive again." Her eyes warmed. "Then let's bring it back to life." And just like that, the choice was made. Not to inherit a mansion, not to claim a name, not to hold on to the past, but to turn a legacy of fear, running, and silence into something louder, something kinder, something that would outlive me. The Lawson estate would become a place of healing, for others, and for me. 3 months later, the mansion didn't look like a mansion anymore. It felt alive. The walls echoed, not with formal laughter or old family pride, but with real voices, real footsteps, real people who needed help. On opening day of the Harper Wells Community Center, a small line had already formed outside by sunrise. Older veterans with stiff shoulders, mothers holding sick children, seniors leaning on canes, families who carried more worry than money. Exactly the people I always felt most connected to. I stood in the foyer, the same one that once smelled like expensive polish and silence, now filled with warm light, fresh paint, and soft chatter. Mrs. Brooks wiped a tear discreetly. "He would have loved this, you know," she whispered. I touched the pendant at my neck. "I hope so." The first patient was an elderly man who shuffled inside, hat in hand. "My wife loved General Lawson," he said, giving me a small smile. "Said he was a hard man, but a good one. She would have been amazed to see his house turned into this." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you," I said. Then came a young mother with a toddler coughing so hard it shook his tiny shoulders. "Ma'am, I don't have insurance," she stammered. I knelt beside the boy, brushing his hair gently. "You're here now," I said. "We'll take care of him. That's what this place is for." Her eyes filled with tears. One by one, the rooms filled. Exam rooms, counseling offices, the therapy center in the old ballroom, laughter, tears, gratitude, all of it weaving life into the house again. A house built on a fractured legacy was finally being used to heal fractures. It was late afternoon when Mrs. Brooks approached me again. "There's someone here to see you," she said carefully. "I think you might want to speak with him." I nodded, wiping my hands, and walked toward the foyer. I froze halfway down the hall. It was Derek. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't sneering. He wasn't even standing tall. He looked smaller, like the anger had drained out of him and left something vulnerable behind. He clutched his hat awkwardly in both hands. "Emily," he said quietly. For the first time, I waited. He cleared his throat. "I know I was cruel. I grew up hearing a very different story about your grandmother, about your mother." He looked around the center, his voice cracking. "And maybe that's why I never questioned it. Because it was easier to believe the version that made us look good." I didn't speak. Truth didn't need pushing. It needed space. He swallowed. "My father, he wasn't a good man. And I think part of me knew that even as a kid. But admitting it felt like betrayal. So I held on to the lie instead." He looked up, eyes glassy. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything. You didn't deserve any of it." I studied him. The man who had screamed at me, called me nothing, tried to erase me, standing here now, asking forgiveness, not as a rival, but as a wounded fragment of a broken family. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. He exhaled shakily, nodding. This place, it's good. Really good. He would have been proud. My throat tightened. Do you want a tour? I asked. He looked surprised, then relieved. Yeah, he murmured. I'd like that. We walked together slowly through the halls. He paused often, taking everything in, as if realizing the house still held the best parts of the family he'd lost, and maybe, in some small way, the best parts of him too. When evening fell, the last patient left, and the house grew quiet again. I stepped into the garden behind the mansion, the same garden the general used to sit in on peaceful days. A breeze rustled the leaves. I closed my eyes. I hope I did right by you, I whispered into the soft dusk. I hope Mom and Margaret see this too. The wind brushed against my cheek, warm and gentle, like a hand I would never get to hold. For the first time in my life, my story didn't feel like a question without an answer. It felt like a beginning, a name reclaimed, a legacy rewritten, a family healed in the only way that mattered. Not through blood, through choice, through kindness, through the courage to turn pain into purpose. I touched the pendant again, Harper Wells, and walked back toward the house glowing softly in the evening light. For the first time, I was home,